The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor cast harsh shadows as I walked toward the cardiac surgery unit, my heels clicking against the polished floor with each determined step. 23 years had passed since my father looked me in the eye and told me I'd never amount to anything more than a disappointment to our family name. Today, I was about to prove him wrong in the most profound way possible. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I'm a cardiac surgeon. But more importantly, I'm the daughter who was told she wasn't good enough to save her own mother's life. The irony wasn't lost on me as I approached the nurse's station where my father sat hunched over paperwork, his graying hair catching the overhead light. He looked older, more fragile than the intimidating figure who had dominated my childhood with his impossible expectations and crushing criticism. For a moment, I hesitated, wondering if this confrontation would change everything between us forever. The story begins 23 years earlier, in a house that felt more like a courtroom than a home. I was 15, sitting at our mahogany dining table, surrounded by my family's collection of medical degrees and accolades that adorned every wall like trophies of intellectual superiority. My father, Dr. James Chen, was the head of cardiology at Metropolitan General Hospital, a position he'd held for over 2 decades. My mother, Linda, was a quiet woman who had sacrificed her dreams to support his career, and my younger brother, Michael, was already showing signs of following in our father's footsteps. Sarah, my father's voice cut through the dinner conversation. Like a scalpel through flesh, your grades came in today. B+ in biology, A- in chemistry, and don't even get me started on your mathematics score. His chopsticks paused midair as he fixed me with that familiar look of disappointment that had become as routine as our evening meals. How do you expect to get into medical school with these mediocre results? I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. Dad, these are good grades. I'm in the top 10% of my class. Good? He set down his chopsticks with deliberate precision. Good is not enough in this family. Your brother Michael scored perfect marks in all his subjects this semester, and he's 2 years younger than you. Excellence isn't optional, Sarah. It's the minimum requirement for carrying the Chen name. My mother reached across the table, her fingers briefly touching mine before retreating. James, perhaps we should what, Linda? Lower our standards? Accept mediocrity? His voice rose slightly, though he maintained the controlled tone that made his displeasure even more cutting. Sarah needs to understand that medicine isn't a career for people who settle for good enough. Lives depend on precision, on excellence, on being the best. If she can't achieve that in high school, how can she possibly handle the responsibility of holding someone's heart in her hands? The silence that followed was deafening. I felt my cheeks burn with shame and anger, emotions I'd learned to swallow down over the years. But something in my father's words struck deeper than usual, igniting a flame of determination that would burn for the next 2 decades. I'll show you, I whispered, barely audible above the sound of my heartbeat thundering in my ears. What did you say? My father's eyebrows rose, not in curiosity but in the kind of dangerous calm that preceded his most devastating critiques. I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze directly for the first time in months. I said I'll show you. I'll become the best cardiac surgeon you've ever seen, and one day, I'll prove that your opinion of me was wrong. The laugh that escaped his lips was sharp and humorless. Sarah, you can barely handle high school biology. Do you have any idea what it takes to become a cardiac surgeon? The years of study, the sacrifices, the mental fortitude required? You lack the discipline, the focus, and frankly, the natural ability that this profession demands. Each word felt like a physical blow, but I refused to let them break me. Instead, I made a promise to myself that night, lying in my bed staring at the ceiling. I would not only become a doctor, but I would become the kind of surgeon my father could never dismiss or diminish. The next morning, everything changed. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that surprised even me. While my classmates were at parties or football games, I was in the library, dissecting every concept, memorizing every formula, and pushing myself beyond what I thought possible. My grades improved dramatically, but more importantly, I discovered Something my father had never seen in me, an unwavering determination to prove him wrong. College applications became my first real battlefield. While my father pushed me toward more realistic career paths like nursing or medical administration, I secretly applied to pre-med programs at the most competitive universities in the country. The day my acceptance letter arrived from Harvard, I remember standing in our kitchen, holding the envelope with trembling hands while my parents read over my shoulder. "This is unexpected," my father said finally, his voice lacking its usual certainty. "Harvard is extremely competitive. I'm surprised they saw potential in your application." Even in my moment of triumph, he couldn't bring himself to offer genuine praise. But I had learned by then that his approval wasn't necessary for my success. It was just fuel for my fire. Harvard pre-med was brutal. The competition was fierce, the workload overwhelming, and the pressure constant. Many nights, I questioned whether my father had been right about my limitations. Organic chemistry nearly broke me, and I spent countless hours in study groups where I felt like the least prepared person in the room. But every time I considered giving up, I heard his voice echoing in my mind, "You lack the discipline, the focus, and frankly, the natural ability that this profession demands." Those words became my anchor and my motivation. I would not prove him right. During my junior year, something extraordinary happened. I was working as a research assistant in the cardiac lab when Dr. Martinez, the lead researcher, pulled me aside after a particularly complex experiment on heart valve reconstruction. "Sarah," she said, studying my data analysis with the kind of attention that made my stomach flutter with nervousness, "this work is exceptional. Your understanding of cardiac mechanics is intuitive, almost instinctive. Have you considered specializing in cardiac surgery?" The question hit me like lightning. I've thought about it, but I wasn't sure I had what it takes. Dr. Martinez smiled, her expression warm but serious. "Some people study hearts their entire careers and never develop the kind of spatial reasoning and technical understanding you've shown in just 6 months. You have a gift, Sarah. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." That night, I called my parents to share the news. My mother was thrilled, asking questions about my research and expressing genuine pride in my accomplishments. My father's response was more measured. "Dr. Martinez is being kind, Sarah. Research assistantships are designed to boost students' confidence. Don't let it go to your head. Medical school admission is still extremely competitive, and cardiac surgery, well, let's just say it's not a field where mediocrity is tolerated." The conversation ended with my usual feeling of deflation, but this time something was different. Dr. Martinez's words carried more weight than my father's dismissal. For the first time in my life, someone who didn't share my DNA believed in my potential. Medical school at Johns Hopkins was where I truly found my calling. The human heart became my obsession, its intricate chambers and valves as familiar to me as the rooms of my childhood home. I excelled in anatomy, physiology, and pathology, but it was in the operating room where I truly came alive. My first time assisting in cardiac surgery was during my 3rd year. The patient was a 62-year-old man who needed a triple bypass. And I was chosen to be the second assistant. As I stood beside the table, watching the lead surgeon work with precision and grace, something clicked into place. The heart laid bare before us wasn't just an organ, it was a masterpiece of biological engineering, and I wanted to learn every secret it held. "Suture," the surgeon called, and I passed the instrument with steady hands, my movements becoming more fluid with each request. By the end of the 6-hour procedure, I knew with absolute certainty that this was my destiny. The attending surgeon, Dr. Robert Kim, noticed my interest and skill. After the surgery, he approached me with an offer that would change my life. "You have natural hands for this work, Sarah. I'm starting a cardiac surgery research project next month, and I could use an assistant who understands both the technical and theoretical aspects of the field. Interested?" I didn't hesitate. Yay. Working with Dr. Kim opened doors I hadn't even known existed. He became my mentor, guiding me through the complexities of cardiac surgery while nurturing the confidence that my father had spent years eroding. Under his guidance, I published my first research paper on minimally invasive valve repair, which caught the attention of several prestigious residency programs the day I received my acceptance letter for the cardiac surgery residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. I was alone in my small apartment, having just finished a 36-hour shift. I held the letter in my hands, reading it 3 times before the reality sank in. I had done it. Despite every obstacle, every moment of doubt, every cruel word from my father, I had secured a position in one of the most competitive residency programs in the country. When I called home to share the news, my mother cried with joy. My father's response was characteristically measured. "It's a good program. Let's see if you can handle the demands of residency." Even then, after years of proving myself, he couldn't bring himself to express pride in my accomplishments. But I had learned to find validation elsewhere, in the respect of my mentors, the gratitude of patients, and most importantly, in my own growing confidence. A residency was 5 years of hell disguised as medical training. 20-hour days, life and death decisions, and the constant pressure to perform flawlessly while learning skills that took decades to master. Many residents didn't make it through the program, transferring to less demanding specialties or leaving medicine altogether. But I thrived in the chaos. My hands, once deemed unsteady by my father, became instruments of precision. My mind, once labeled as lacking focus, developed the ability to compartmentalize and analyze even in the most high-pressure situations. I was becoming the surgeon I had always known I could be, despite everything my father had told me about my limitations. The breakthrough moment came during my 4th year of residency. We had a patient, a 45-year-old mother of 3, who came in with a massive heart attack. Her left anterior descending artery was completely blocked, and she was in cardiogenic shock. The attending was stuck in another emergency surgery, and I was the senior resident on call. "Dr. Chen," the nurse said, her voice tight with urgency. "Her pressure is dropping fast. We need to get her to the OR now." The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a familiar cloak. This woman's life was in my hands, and there was no one else to turn to. As I scrubbed in, I thought about all the times my father had questioned my capabilities, all the moments when I had doubted myself. But none of that mattered now. Only the patient mattered. The surgery took 4 hours. We performed an emergency bypass, working with a heart that was barely beating, tissues that were damaged and fragile. But my hands never shook, my focus never wavered. When the patient's heart began beating normally again, when her blood pressure stabilized and her color returned, I felt a surge of satisfaction that no amount of praise from my father could have matched. The patient recovered completely, returning home to her children and resuming her life as if the surgery had never happened. That's the beauty of cardiac surgery. When done well, it becomes invisible, allowing patients to forget they were ever sick. After residency, I was offered a fellowship at Stanford, one of the most prestigious cardiac surgery programs in the world. The 2-year fellowship would specialize in pediatric cardiac surgery, a field that demanded even greater precision and skill. Working on hearts the size of walnuts, repairing defects in patients who weighed less than 10 pounds, required a level of technical expertise that few surgeons ever achieved. My father's reaction to the fellowship offer was predictably underwhelming. "Stanford has a good reputation. Try not to disappoint them." But I had stopped seeking his approval years earlier. The validation I needed came from successful surgeries, grateful families, and the respect of my colleagues. I was building a reputation based on my merit, not my family name. The fellowship years were transformative. I worked with Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a legend in pediatric cardiac surgery, who had developed several groundbreaking techniques for treating congenital heart defects. Under her mentorship, I learned not just the technical aspects of surgery but also the emotional and psychological skills needed to work with families facing their worst nightmares. "Surgery is only half of what we do," Dr. Rodriguez told me during one of our late-night conversations in the hospital cafeteria. "The other half is helping families understand that their child's life can still be full and meaningful, even with a repaired heart. We're not just fixing organs, Sarah. We're preserving futures." Her words resonated deeply with me. I had always been drawn to the technical challenges of cardiac surgery, but working with children and their families added a new dimension to my calling. These weren't just medical cases. They were small human beings with entire lives ahead of them, depending on my skill and judgment. One case, in particular, changed my perspective forever. Emma was a 3-year-old girl with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, a condition where the left side of the heart is severely underdeveloped. She needed a series of 3 complex surgeries, performed over several years, to essentially reroute her circulation and allow her single-functioning ventricle to support her entire body. The first surgery, the Norwood procedure, was scheduled when Emma was just 5 days old. Her parents, Maria and David, were young, scared, and completely overwhelmed by the medical terminology and surgical risks. As I explained the procedure to them, I saw my fears reflected in their eyes. "Dr. Chan," Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "what are the chances she'll be okay?" I looked at this tiny baby, no bigger than a loaf of bread, and felt the full weight of what we were attempting. The surgery is complex, and there are risks. But Emma is strong, and we have an excellent team. I'm going to do everything in my power to give her the best possible outcome. The surgery took 8 hours. Working on a heart smaller than a golf ball, rerouting major blood vessels, and creating new pathways for circulation. Every suture had to be perfect, every connection precise. One mistake could be fatal. When we successfully weaned Emma off the heart-lung machine and saw her tiny heart beating steadily in her chest, the entire operating room erupted in quiet celebration. We had given this little girl a chance at life. Emma's recovery was complicated, with several setbacks and additional procedures, but she fought with the determination of someone 10 times her age. Her parents never left her side, and I found myself checking on her even when I wasn't officially on duty. She had become more than a patient, she was a symbol of why I had chosen this profession. 6 months later, Emma went home. 2 years after that, she returned for her second surgery, the Glenn procedure. By then, she was a walking, talking toddler who brightened every room she entered. The third surgery, the Fontan, was performed when she was 4, and it was the most technically challenging procedure I had ever attempted, but Emma sailed through it. Today, she's a healthy 8-year-old who plays soccer, loves to paint, and has no memory of ever being sick. Her parents send me updates and photos regularly, and every time I see her smile, I'm reminded of why I pushed through all those years of doubt and criticism. After completing my fellowship, I was offered a position as an attending cardiac surgeon at Metropolitan General Hospital, the same hospital where my father had built his reputation. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of trying to escape his shadow, I was voluntarily stepping back into it. The decision wasn't easy. I had offers from several prestigious hospitals across the country, positions that would have allowed me to build my reputation away from the Chen family legacy. But something drew me back home. Perhaps it was a desire to prove myself on my father's turf, or maybe it was simply time to face the past. My first day as an attending was surreal. Walking through the halls where I had once visited as a child, now wearing the white coat of a cardiac surgeon, felt like stepping into an alternate reality. Nurses and residents who had known me as Dr. Chen's daughter now addressed me as a Dr. Chen. In my own right, the respect was hard-earned but genuine. My reputation had preceded me, built on successful surgeries, published research, and the recommendations of mentors who believed in my abilities. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged in these halls, not because of my family name, but because of my accomplishments. My father and I maintained a professional relationship at the hospital. We were cordial in meetings, respectful in consultations, but there was always an underlying tension. He had never admitted that his early assessments of my abilities were wrong, and I had never confronted him about the damage his lack of faith had caused. 3 years passed in this careful dance of professional coexistence. I built my reputation within the hospital, known for taking on complex cases and achieving excellent outcomes. My surgical skills were recognized not just by my colleagues, but by the patients and families who trusted me with their most precious possessions, their lives and the lives of their loved ones. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I was in my office, reviewing surgical notes from a particularly complex case, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my brother Michael's number, but his voice was strained and unfamiliar. "Sarah, you need to come to the hospital. It's Mom." The Words hit me like a physical blow. What happened? Is she okay? Asterisk, she collapsed at home. Dad's with her in the, They think it's her heart. I was out of my office and running toward the emergency department before Michael finished speaking. My mother, who had always been the healthy one in our family, who had never smoked, rarely drank, and maintained a careful diet, was having a heart attack. When I arrived at the, I found my father standing beside my mother's bed, holding her hand while she lay connected to monitors and 4 lines. She was conscious but pale, her breathing shallow and labored. The sight of her looking so fragile and vulnerable shook me to my core. What's her status? I asked the attending physician, Dr. Reynolds, automatically shifting into professional mode despite the personal stakes. Massive anterior wall MI, he replied, using the medical terminology for heart attack. Her LAD is completely occluded. We need to get her to the cath lab immediately for emergency angioplasty. I nodded, my mind racing through the implications. The left anterior descending artery, often called the widowmaker, was completely blocked. This was a life-threatening situation that required immediate intervention. I'll assist with the procedure, I said, already mentally preparing for what needed to be done. That's when my father spoke, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone that had dominated my childhood. No, Sarah. Dr. Reynolds will handle this. You're too emotionally involved to be objective. The words stung, but I understood his reasoning. Family members typically didn't treat their relatives, and emotional involvement could cloud judgment. But as I watched them wheel my mother toward the catheterization lab, I felt helpless in a way I hadn't experienced since my early days of medical school. The angioplasty was successful in opening the blocked artery, but the damage to my mother's heart was extensive. She would need time to recover, and there was a significant chance she would require surgery to repair the weakened heart muscle. Over the next few days, I maintained a careful balance between being a daughter and being a doctor. I stayed close to my mother's bedside, monitoring her progress, but I deferred to Dr. Reynolds and the cardiology team for all medical decisions. My father appreciated this boundary, and for the first time in years, we worked together as allies rather than adversaries. My mother's recovery was slow and complicated. The heart attack had damaged a significant portion of her left ventricle, and despite the successful angioplasty, her heart was struggling to pump effectively. She developed symptoms of heart failure, shortness of breath, fatigue, and fluid retention that indicated the need for more aggressive treatment. After a week of medical management with little improvement, Dr. Reynolds called a family meeting. My father, Michael, and I gathered in the small conference room adjacent to the cardiac care unit, the same room where I had delivered difficult news to countless families over the years. Linda's condition isn't improving as much as we'd hoped. Dr. Reynolds began, his tone gentle but serious. The damage from the heart attack was extensive, and her heart function is severely compromised. We need to consider surgical intervention. The room fell silent. I knew what he was suggesting before he said it, and the implications were staggering. What kind of surgery? My father asked, though I could see in his eyes that he already knew the answer. She needs a heart transplant, Dr. Reynolds said quietly. Her current heart function is too poor for her to survive long-term without a new heart. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Heart transplantation was still a complex and risky procedure, with long waiting lists and no guarantee of finding a suitable donor. My mother was 67 years old, which put her at the upper limit of transplant candidacy. What are her chances? Michael asked, his voice barely audible. If we can find a suitable donor, and if the surgery goes well, she could have many good years ahead of her. But the waiting list is long, and her condition is deteriorating. Time is not on our side. I felt numb, my medical training warring with my emotions. I knew the statistics, understood the risks, and could see the medical reality clearly. But this wasn't just another patient, this was my mother, the woman who had quietly supported my dreams even when my father dismissed them. After the meeting, my father and I found ourselves alone in the hospital corridor. For the first time in years, his composed facade cracked, revealing the scared husband beneath the accomplished physician. "I don't know what to do, Sarah," he admitted, his voice shaking. "I've dealt with hundreds of cardiac cases, but this is Linda. I can't think clearly." Seeing my father vulnerable and frightened stirred something in me that I hadn't expected. Despite our complicated relationship, he was still my father, and he was facing the possible loss of his wife of 40 years. "We'll get through this, Dad," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Mom is strong, and she has the best possible care." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw a flicker of something I hadn't seen since childhood: respect, perhaps, or at least acknowledgement that I had become someone he could rely on. The next few weeks were a blur of medical consultations, insurance approvals, and the agonizing wait for a suitable donor heart. My mother was placed on the transplant list, but her condition continued to deteriorate. She developed pulmonary edema, requiring intubation and mechanical ventilation. The strong, independent woman who had raised me was now dependent on machines. To keep her alive, I spent every free moment at her bedside, talking to her even though she couldn't respond, reading her favorite books aloud, and playing the classical music she loved. My father was there too, maintaining his vigil with the dedication of someone who had never loved anyone else. It was during one of these quiet moments that my father finally spoke the words I had been waiting my entire life to hear. "I was wrong about you, Sarah," he said quietly, not looking away from my mother's face. "I was wrong about everything. You've become an exceptional surgeon, maybe even better than I ever was. I let my fears and insecurities blind me to your potential." The apology hung between us, heavy with years of unspoken resentment and missed opportunities. I wanted to be angry, to tell him how much his lack of faith had hurt me, how many nights I had cried myself to sleep wondering why I wasn't good enough for my father. But looking at him now, broken and frightened, I found only compassion. "I understand why you pushed me so hard," I replied. "You wanted me to be the best I could be. You just didn't see that I was already trying to be exactly that." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, two cardiac surgeons who had spent years avoiding each other, finally finding common ground in our love for the woman who had held our family together. 2 days later, we received the call every transplant family both hopes for and dreads. A donor heart had become available, a 25-year-old woman who had died in a car accident, whose family had made the generous decision to donate her organs. The heart was a perfect match for my mother. The transplant surgery was scheduled for that evening, and the entire cardiac surgery team prepared for what would be one of the most complex procedures we had ever attempted. My mother was critically ill, her body weakened by weeks of heart failure, but this was her only chance for survival. As they wheeled her into the operating room, she was briefly conscious, the ventilator temporarily removed so she could speak. She looked at me with the same loving expression she had worn throughout my childhood, even during the times when my father's disappointment filled our home. "I'm proud of you, Sarah," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You've become everything I always knew you could be." Those words carried me through the longest night of my life. The surgery took 12 hours, with Dr. Patterson, our chief of cardiac surgery, leading the team. I wasn't allowed to participate directly, but I remained in the hospital throughout the procedure, pacing the corridors and waiting for updates. My father and I waited together, sharing coffee and memories, talking about my mother in ways we never had before. He told me about their early years together, how her quiet strength had supported him through his struggles to establish his career. I shared stories about my childhood, the moments when her encouragement had meant everything to me. When Dr. Patterson finally emerged from the operating room, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "The surgery went well," he announced. "The new heart is functioning beautifully, and Linda's vital signs are stable. She's not out of the woods yet. The next few days will be critical, but I'm hopeful." The relief was overwhelming. My father wept, something I had never seen him do, and I found myself crying too, tears of gratitude and exhaustion and hope. My mother's recovery was slow but steady. The new heart, young and strong, gradually took over the work of sustaining her life. She remained on a ventilator for several days, then slowly began to breathe on her own. When she finally opened her eyes and recognized us, it felt like a miracle. "How do you feel?" I asked her, holding her hand gently. She smiled. And even through the fatigue and medication, her smile was radiant. "Like I have a future again," she whispered. The months of recovery that followed were challenging, filled with anti-rejection medications, regular biopsies, and the constant fear of complications. But my mother approached each day with a determination that inspired everyone around her. She wanted to live, not just survive, and her new heart seemed to share that desire. During her recovery, something beautiful happened in our family. My father and I began to rebuild our relationship, not as the disappointed parent and inadequate child we had been, but as colleagues and adults who respected each other's abilities. He started asking for my opinion on difficult cases, and I found myself appreciating his experience and wisdom in ways I never had before. 6 months after the transplant, my mother was well enough to attend my recognition ceremony when I was named the hospital's Physician of the Year. As I stood at the podium, looking out at an audience filled with colleagues and friends, I saw my parents sitting in the front row. My father was beaming with pride, applauding enthusiastically, and my mother was crying happy tears. "This award represents not just my efforts," I said during my acceptance speech, "but the support of mentors who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and the love of a family that taught me the true meaning of perseverance." After the ceremony, my father approached me with an expression I had never seen before: pure, unadulterated pride. "I want you to know," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "that you have exceeded every expectation I ever had, and many that I was too limited to imagine. You're not just a great surgeon, Sarah. You're a great human being, and I'm honored to be your father." The words I had waited my entire life to hear had finally been spoken, and they were even more meaningful because they came after years of proving myself, not just to him, but to myself. Today, 5 years later, my mother continues to thrive with her new heart. She travels, gardens, and spoils her grandchildren with the energy of someone half her age. The heart that once belonged to a young woman who died too soon now beats with the rhythm of a life fully lived and deeply appreciated. My father and I have developed a strong professional relationship, often consulting on complex cases and sharing our expertise. He has become one of my strongest advocates, referring patients to me and speaking proudly of my accomplishments to anyone who will listen. The competitive dynamic that defined our early relationship has evolved into mutual respect and genuine affection, but perhaps the most important change has been in my perspective. I no longer measure my worth by my father's approval or anyone else's validation. I know who I am: a skilled surgeon, a compassionate healer, and a woman who refused to let other people's limitations define her potential. The story comes full circle every time I walk through the halls of Metropolitan General Hospital. The same corridors where I once felt inadequate and unwelcome now feel like home. The nurses who once knew me only as Dr. Chen's daughter now introduce me to new staff members as Dr. Sarah Chen, one of our finest cardiac surgeons. My practice has grown to include some of the most complex cases in the region. Patients travel from across the country to receive care from my team, and I have trained dozens of residents and fellows who have gone on to distinguished careers of their own. The little girl who was told she lacked the natural ability for medicine has become a teacher and mentor to the next generation of physicians, but success in surgery isn't measured only by professional accolades or peer recognition. It's measured in the lives we save, the families we help, and the hope we restore. Every successful surgery is a victory not just for the patient, but for everyone who believed in their recovery, including the surgeon who refused to give up. There are still difficult days, cases that don't go as planned, and families who face devastating losses despite our best efforts. Cardiac surgery will always be a field where the stakes are impossibly high and the margin for error is virtually non-existent. But I have learned that our failures don't define us, our response to those failures does. When I think about the journey that brought me to this point, I'm struck by the role that adversity played in shaping my character. My father's early criticism, painful as it was, instilled in me a determination to prove myself that might never have developed otherwise. The years of feeling inadequate taught me empathy for patients and families who feel overwhelmed by medical crises. Most importantly, I learned that validation from others, while meaningful, cannot be the foundation of self-worth. The confidence I needed to become a successful surgeon had to come from within, built through years of study, practice, and the gradual accumulation of skills and knowledge. My relationship with my father has taught me valuable lessons about forgiveness and growth. People can change, relationships can evolve, and it's never too late to acknowledge past mistakes and build something better. The man who once told me I wasn't qualified to be a surgeon now brags about my accomplishments to anyone who will listen. As I reflect on this journey, I'm reminded of something Dr. Rodriguez told me during my fellowship. We're not just fixing organs, Sarah. We're preserving futures. Every patient who walks into my operating room carries with them the hopes and dreams of an entire family. Children who want their parents to see them graduate, spouses who aren't ready to say goodbye, parents who refuse to outlive their children. The weight of that responsibility is enormous, but it's also a privilege. To be trusted with someone's life, to have the knowledge and skill to repair what's broken and restore what's lost, is an honor that never becomes routine. Every successful surgery is a reminder of why I chose this path, despite every obstacle and doubt. Looking ahead, I see new challenges and opportunities. Medical technology continues to advance, offering new ways to treat conditions that were once considered hopeless. Artificial hearts, robotic surgery, and genetic therapies are expanding the boundaries of what's possible in cardiac care. I am excited to be part of that evolution, to continue learning and growing throughout my career. I also look forward to continuing my role as a mentor and teacher. The residents and fellows who work with me remind me of myself at their age, ambitious, nervous, eager to prove themselves. I try to give them the encouragement and support that I sometimes lacked early in my career, helping them build the confidence they need to excel. But perhaps most importantly, I look forward to continuing to serve my patients and their families with the same dedication and compassion that drives me every day. Whether it's a routine procedure or a complex emergency, whether the patient is a child or an elderly adult, each case deserves my very best effort. The story of how I became a cardiac surgeon is really a story about perseverance, growth, and the power of refusing to accept other people's limitations. It's about finding strength in adversity, building confidence through achievement, and never giving up on your dreams, no matter how impossible they might seem. When I walked into that hospital corridor at the beginning of this story, approaching my father with news of my mother's condition, I was carrying with me 23 years of proof that his early assessment of my abilities was wrong. But more than that, I was carrying the confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're capable of achieving. The moment when the nurse greeted me as Dr. Chan, our top cardiac surgeon, in front of my father wasn't just professional recognition, it was the culmination of a journey that began with a teenage girl's promise to prove herself worthy of carrying the family name. It was validation that dreams pursued with enough determination and dedication can overcome any obstacles, including the doubts of those we love most. Today, when young women approach me for career advice, I tell them the same thing I learned through my struggles: your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions, even when those people are your own family. Success comes from within, built through hard work, continuous learning, and an unwavering belief in your potential. The path may be difficult, and there will be moments when you question whether you're strong enough to continue, but if you refuse to give up, you can achieve things that once seemed impossible. My father and I have come full circle, from adversaries to allies, from disappointment to pride, from misunderstanding to mutual respect. The little girl who once sat at our dining table, crushed by his harsh words, has become the woman he now turns to for advice on the most complex cardiac cases. But the most profound moment of this entire journey came just last month, when I was called to the emergency room for a trauma case. A young girl, barely 16, had been in a car accident and suffered severe chest trauma. Her heart was damaged, and she needed immediate surgery to survive. I scrubbed in for what would be one of the most challenging procedures of my career. I noticed someone else in the observation gallery above the operating room. My father, now retired but still maintaining privileges at the hospital, had come to watch. Not to question my judgment or offer unsolicited advice, but simply to witness his daughter doing what she did best. The surgery was complex, requiring innovative techniques and split-second decisions. The girl's heart had been lacerated in multiple places, and traditional repair methods weren't sufficient. I had to think creatively, drawing on years of experience and training to devise a solution that would save her life. As I worked, I could feel my father's presence above, but it wasn't the oppressive weight of disapproval I had once known. Instead, it was the supportive presence of someone who believed in my abilities completely. When I successfully repaired the damage and the girl's heart began beating strongly again, I looked up to see my father wiping tears from his eyes. After the surgery, he met me in the hallway, still in his street clothes, looking older but somehow more peaceful than I had ever seen him. "Sarah," he said, his voice filled with wonder, "I watched you save that girl's life, and I realized something. You didn't just become the surgeon I always hoped you would be. You became something much better. You became the surgeon I never had the vision to imagine." Those words, spoken in a hospital corridor at 2 in the morning, completed a circle that had begun decades earlier with harsh criticism and impossible expectations. They represented not just his acknowledgement of my abilities, but his recognition that he had been limited by his narrow definition of success. The young girl recovered completely, going on to graduate from high school and pursue her dreams. Her parents wrote me a letter that I keep in my office, thanking me not just for saving their daughter's life, but for giving her back her future. That letter serves as a daily reminder of why I chose this profession and why I refused to let anyone, even my father, define the limits of what I could achieve. As I write this story, I'm preparing for another complex surgery, a heart transplant. For a young mother who wants nothing more than to see her children grow up. Her case reminds me of my own mother's journey, the fragility of life, and the incredible gift we have as surgeons to restore hope where there was once only despair. The girl who was once told she wasn't qualified to hold someone's heart in her hands has now performed thousands of cardiac procedures, trained hundreds of young doctors, and saved countless lives. But more than the professional achievements, I'm proud of the journey itself, the refusal to accept limitations, the determination to prove that potential isn't determined by other people's opinions, and the discovery that true success comes from serving others with skill, compassion, and unwavering dedication. My father was wrong about many things when I was young, but he was right about one crucial point: medicine isn't a career for people who settle for good enough. It demands excellence, precision, and an absolute commitment to continuous improvement. The difference is that I found those qualities within myself, not because of his criticism, but in spite of it. Today, as I walk through the halls of Metropolitan General Hospital, I carry with me the confidence that comes from knowing exactly who I am and what I'm capable of achieving. I am Dr. Sarah Chen, cardiac surgeon, teacher, healer, and the woman who proved that the only limits that truly matter are the ones we place on ourselves. The nurse who greeted me as the top doctor that day wasn't just acknowledging my professional status, she was witnessing the culmination of a journey that began with a promise made by a defiant teenager and fulfilled by a woman who refused to let anyone else write the story of her life. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson of all: we have the power to define our worth, to pursue our dreams, and to become the person we were always meant to be, regardless of who believes in us along the way. Success isn't measured by the approval of others, but by the lives we touch, the contributions we make, and the legacy we leave behind. My story continues every day, with each patient I treat, each resident I mentor, and each moment I choose to believe in the limitless potential that exists within us all. The girl who was once told she wasn't good enough has become living proof that with enough determination, dedication, and faith in ourselves, we can achieve anything we set our hearts on, and sometimes, just sometimes, we can even change the hearts and minds of those who once doubted us most. The irony of my profession isn't lost on me now, years later, as I stand in my office looking at the wall of certificates and awards that chronicle my journey. I repair hearts for a living, but perhaps the most complex heart repair I ever accomplished was mending the relationship with my father. It required patience, skill, and the kind of delicate precision that can't be taught in medical school. There are moments, late at night when I'm reviewing cases or preparing for complex surgeries, when I think about the alternative version of my life, the one where I listened to my father's assessment of my limitations and chose a different path. Would I have been happier settling for his reduced expectations? Would I have found fulfillment in a career that required less of me? The answer comes easily now: not. The struggles, the years of doubt, the moments when I questioned everything about myself, they were all necessary components of becoming the person I am today. Without them, I might have achieved professional success, but I never would have developed the inner strength and unshakable confidence that define me now. Practice has evolved over the years to include not just surgery, but teaching and research. I've published extensively on minimally invasive cardiac procedures, developed new techniques for pediatric heart surgery, and established a fellowship program that attracts the best and brightest young surgeons from around the world. But perhaps my most important contribution has been mentoring young women who remind me of myself at their age, brilliant, ambitious, but sometimes uncertain about their place in a demanding profession. Dr. Amanda Torres was one such resident. She came to me during her second year, struggling with confidence issues after a senior attending had questioned her surgical skills in front of the entire team. I saw myself in her trembling hands and downcast eyes, and I knew exactly what she needed to hear. Amanda, I told her as we sat in my office after a particularly challenging day, I want you to understand something. Your worth as a surgeon isn't determined by one person's opinion, even if that person has 30 years of experience. Your worth is determined by your dedication to your patients, your commitment to continuous learning, and your refusal to give up when things get difficult. She looked up at me with the same desperate hope I had once felt when Dr. Martinez first told me I had a gift for cardiac surgery. But what if he's right? What if I don't have what it takes? I smiled, remembering asking myself the same question countless times during my training. Then prove him wrong. Use his doubt as fuel to push yourself harder, study more, and practice until your hands are as steady as your determination. Don't let anyone else write the story of your capabilities. Amanda took my words to heart. Over the next 3 years, she transformed herself from an uncertain resident into one of the most skilled young surgeons I've ever trained. She's now completing her fellowship at Johns Hopkins, and I couldn't be prouder of her journey stories. Like Amanda's remind me why representation matters so much in medicine. When young women see someone who looks like them, who has faced similar challenges and overcome them, it expands their sense of what's possible. I never had that kind of role model during my early years. The cardiac surgery field was overwhelmingly male, and I often felt like an outsider trying to prove I belonged. And now, I make it a point to speak at medical schools, participate in mentorship programs, and create opportunities for young women to see themselves in leadership roles. The demographics of cardiac surgery are slowly changing, and I'm proud to be part of that evolution. My mother's recovery and continued health remain one of the greatest joys of my life. At 72, she's more active than many people have her age, and she never misses an opportunity to tell people about her brilliant surgeon daughter. The heart that once belonged to a young woman who died too soon has given my mother 15 years of additional life, 15 years of birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, and precious moments with her grandchildren. She often accompanies me to medical conferences now, not as a patient sharing her story, but as my guest and biggest supporter. At a recent cardiothoracic surgery symposium, she sat in the front row as I delivered a keynote address on innovations in heart transplantation. Afterward, she approached the podium with tears in her eyes. I'm not just proud of what you've accomplished professionally, she told me, her voice thick with emotion. I'm proud of the person you've become, compassionate, determined, and strong enough to forgive those who underestimated you. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about excusing someone's past behavior or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about choosing to move forward without carrying the weight of that pain. My father's early criticism shaped me, but I refused to let it define me. Instead, I used it as motivation to become someone even better than he had imagined possible. I am not just proud of what you've accomplished professionally, she told me, her voice thick with emotion. I'm proud of the person you've become, compassionate, determined, and strong enough to forgive those who underestimated you. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about excusing someone's past behavior or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about choosing to move forward without carrying the weight of that pain. My father's early criticism shaped me, but I refused to let it define me. Instead, I used it as motivation to become someone even better than he had imagined possible. As a mentor myself now, I've learned to challenge my trainees while also providing the emotional support they need to grow. I push them to excel, but I also celebrate their successes and help them learn from their failures. The goal isn't to create miniature versions of myself, but to help each person discover their unique strengths and potential. The medical field continues to evolve at a rapid pace, with new technologies and techniques constantly emerging. Robotic surgery, artificial intelligence, and regenerative medicine are revolutionizing how we approach cardiac care. As someone who has witnessed decades of advancement, I'm excited about the possibilities these innovations will create for future generations of surgeons and patients, but technology, no matter how advanced, can never replace the human elements of medicine, the compassion, intuition, and dedication that drive us to fight for every patient's life. The most sophisticated surgical robot in the world is still just a tool in the hands of a surgeon who has spent years developing the knowledge and skills necessary to use it effectively. My surgical practice now includes some of the most complex cases in the region. Last month, I performed a heart-lung transplant on a young man with congenital heart disease who had been told by multiple specialists that his condition was inoperable. The 22-hour surgery required a team of 30 specialists and represented the culmination of everything I had learned throughout my career. When the patient opened his eyes 3 days after surgery and asked for his parents, I felt the same surge of satisfaction I had experienced during my very first successful cardiac procedure. The technical complexity of the surgery was immense, but the human impact was even greater. A young man who had been given a death sentence was now looking forward to decades of healthy life. These moments of triumph make all the years of struggle worthwhile. They remind me why I chose this profession and why I refuse to let anyone convince me I wasn't qualified for it. Every successful surgery is not just a victory for the patient and their family, but validation of every choice I made along the way. Every late night studying, every moment of self-doubt I pushed through, every time I chose to believe in myself when others didn't. My father and I now collaborate regularly on complex cases, combining his decades of experience with my technical expertise. Our professional relationship has become a source of strength for both of us, proof that even the most damaged relationships can be repaired with time, understanding, and mutual respect. Recently, we co-authored a paper on multi-generational approaches to cardiac surgery, exploring how different generations of surgeons can learn from each other. The paper was well received in the medical community, but for me, its greatest value was the experience of working closely with my father as an equal partner, both of us contributing our unique perspectives to advance the field we both love. The young girl who once sat at our dinner table, devastated by her father's harsh words, could never have imagined that one day she would be co-authoring research papers with him. Life has a way of surprising us, often in the most beautiful ways possible. As I look toward the future, I see new challenges and opportunities on the horizon. I'm currently developing a program to train surgeons in underserved regions of the world, sharing advanced cardiac surgery techniques with medical professionals who don't have access to the same resources we enjoy in developed countries. The goal is to democratize access to life-saving cardiac care, ensuring that geography doesn't determine whether someone lives or dies from heart disease. This work has taken me to places I never expected to visit, remote hospitals in Africa, understaffed clinics in Southeast Asia, and medical schools in South America where brilliant young doctors are hungry for knowledge but lack the resources to pursue advanced training. In each location, I'm reminded of how privileged I am to have had access to world-class medical education and training, but I'm also reminded that talent and dedication exist everywhere, regardless of circumstances. Some of the most naturally gifted surgeons I've ever met are working in hospitals with limited equipment and resources, performing miracles with their hands and minds every day. My job is to help them refine their skills and learn new techniques that can save even more lives. The global health work has also given me perspective on my journey. The obstacles I faced, family criticism, gender bias, and academic pressure, seem small compared to the challenges faced by doctors in regions where basic medical supplies are scarce and electricity is unreliable. Yet these physicians persist, driven by the same calling that motivates all of us in medicine, the desire to heal and help others. Teaching internationally has also reinforced my belief in the importance of mentorship and encouragement. I've seen brilliant medical students transform their self-doubt into confidence when given the right support and guidance. A kind word, a moment of recognition, or simply the belief that someone sees potential in them can change the entire trajectory of a young person's career. This understanding has influenced how I interact with everyone in my professional life, from first-year medical students to experienced colleagues. I try to see potential where others might see limitations, to offer encouragement where others might focus on criticism. It's my way of paying forward the support I received from mentors like Dr. Martinez and Dr. Rodriguez, who believed in me. When I struggle to believe in myself, the impact of mentorship extends far beyond individual careers. When we invest in developing the next generation of medical professionals, we're ultimately investing in the health and well-being of countless future patients. Every student we encourage, every resident we challenge to excel, every young doctor we help build confidence, they all go on to touch thousands of lives throughout their careers. My story is ultimately about transformation, not just my own, but the transformation of relationships, expectations, and possibilities. The father who once told me I wasn't qualified to be a surgeon now refers his most complex cases to me. The uncertain teenager who doubted her abilities has become a confident leader in her field. The strained family relationships have evolved into sources of mutual support and pride, but perhaps the most important transformation has been in my understanding of what defines success. Early in my career, I measured success by external validation, grades, awards, recognition from colleagues. Now, I understand that true success is measured by the lives we save, the students we inspire, and the barriers we break down for those who come after us. Every time a young woman tells me that seeing my example gave her the courage to pursue cardiac surgery, I'm reminded that our journeys are part of something much larger. We're not just building our careers. We're expanding the possibilities for everyone who shares our dreams. The little girl who was told she lacked the natural ability for medicine has become living proof that potential isn't fixed or predetermined. It can be developed, nurtured, and unleashed through determination, hard work, and an unwavering belief in oneself. The only truly limiting factors are the ones we accept as true. As I continue to practice, teach, and explore new frontiers in cardiac surgery, I carry with me the lessons learned from every challenge I've faced. The criticism that once threatened to break my spirit instead forged it into something stronger. The moments of doubt that could have derailed my dreams instead taught me to trust my judgment. The relationships that seemed irreparably damaged were ultimately healed through patience, forgiveness, and mutual growth. My journey from dismissed daughter to respected surgeon is a testament to the power of persistence, the importance of believing in ourselves, and the beautiful possibility that we can always become more than others expect, and sometimes more than we ever dared to imagine. The operating room has become my sanctuary, the place where everything I've learned and experienced converges into moments of pure purpose. There's something almost spiritual about holding a human heart in your hands, feeling its rhythm, understanding its intricate machinery, and knowing that your skill and judgment will determine whether it continues beating for decades to come. Yesterday, I performed what might have been the most challenging surgery of my career, a procedure that brought my personal and professional journey full circle in ways I never could have anticipated. The patient was Dr. Elizabeth Morgan, a retired physician who had spent 40 years practicing family medicine before her own heart began to fail. What made this case extraordinary wasn't just the medical complexity, but the profound conversation we had the night before surgery. Dr. Chen, she said, her voice weak but her eyes still sharp with intelligence, I need to tell you something. 30 years ago, I was on the admissions committee at Johns Hopkins Medical School. I remember your application, and I remember the discussion we had about whether to accept you. My hand stilled as I adjusted her foreline. You were on the committee? She nodded slowly. There were some members who questioned whether you had what it takes to succeed in such a demanding program. Your father's reputation preceded you, and there were concerns about nepotism, about whether you were riding on his coattails rather than your merit. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All these years, I had never known how close I had come to being rejected from medical school, how my entire career had hung in the balance during those committee discussions. But you voted to accept me, I said, more statement than question, because I had been admitted. I did more than vote for you, Dr. Morgan said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. I fought for you. I saw something in your application that the others missed, not just intelligence or academic achievement, but a kind of determined resilience that can't be taught. I told the committee that day that you would either be a spectacular failure or a spectacular success, and I was willing to bet on success. As I prepared her for surgery the next morning, I carried with me the weight of that long-ago decision. This woman had seen potential in me when others saw only risk. She had advocated for my dreams when I was just a name on an application, and now, 3 decades later, I was the one holding her life in my hands. The surgery took 8 hours. Dr. Morgan needed a complete valve replacement and bypass surgery, complicated by her age and previous cardiac events. Every suture had to be perfect, every decision calculated with the precision that comes from years of experience. As I worked, I thought about the circle of influence and impact that connects all our lives in ways we rarely understand. When Dr. Morgan woke up in recovery, the first thing she asked was whether the surgery had been successful. When I told her everything had gone perfectly, she smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had made exactly the right bet 30 years earlier. "I knew you had it in you," she whispered. "Some people are born to heal others, and you were one of them." Cases like Dr. Morgan's remind me that our careers are built not just on our efforts, but on the faith and support of countless people who believe in us along the way. Teachers who encourage us, mentors who guide us, colleagues who trust us, and sometimes strangers who see something in us that we don't yet see in ourselves. The ripple effects of these moments of faith extend far beyond our individual lives. Every patient I save goes on to impact other lives: children who get to keep their parents, spouses who grow old together, grandparents who see another generation born. The surgery I perform today might prevent a heart attack next year, which means a family doesn't lose their provider, which means children get to go to college, which means those children might become doctors themselves and save other lives. So this interconnectedness of human experience has become clearer to me as I've gained more experience and perspective. We're all part of an enormous web of influence, each decision and action creating waves that spread far beyond what we can see or measure. My father understands this now in ways he didn't when I was young. Last week, we were discussing a particularly complex case when he made an observation that surprised me with its insight. "You know, Sarah," he said, "I think my biggest mistake as a parent wasn't setting high expectations for you. It was failing to recognize that you were already exceeding every reasonable expectation I should have had. I was so focused on finding flaws that I missed the extraordinary person you were becoming." The honesty in his admission was both painful and healing. It acknowledged the years of damage while also recognizing the growth we had both experienced since then. Our relationship now is stronger than it ever was during my childhood, built on mutual respect rather than parental authority. That we've learned to collaborate rather than compete, to complement each other's strengths rather than expose each other's weaknesses. When we work together on difficult cases, our different perspectives and experiences create better outcomes for patients. The knowledge and wisdom he's accumulated over decades, combined with my technical skills and more recent training, make us an effective team, but perhaps more importantly, we've learned to communicate with kindness and respect. The harsh criticism that characterized our early relationship has been replaced by constructive feedback and genuine encouragement. We both understand now that excellence can be pursued without sacrificing compassion, that high standards don't require emotional brutality. This evolution in our relationship has influenced how I interact with everyone in my professional life. I've learned to challenge people to grow while also providing the emotional support they need to take risks and learn from mistakes. The residents and fellows who work with me know that I expect excellence, but they also know that I believe in their ability to achieve it. Dr. Jennifer Liu, one of my current cardiothoracic surgery residents, exemplifies this approach. When she first joined my service, she was technically skilled but lacked confidence in her decision-making. Instead of criticizing her uncertainty, I worked with her to build systematic approaches to complex clinical situations. "Surgery isn't just about having steady hands," I told her during one of our mentoring sessions. "It's about developing the judgment to know when to be aggressive and when to be conservative, when to take risks and when to play it safe." That kind of wisdom comes from experience, but it also comes from learning to trust your instincts. Throughout rotation, I watched Jennifer transform from a hesitant resident into a confident young surgeon. She learned to trust her clinical judgment while still seeking input when appropriate. More importantly, she learned that asking questions isn't a sign of weakness, but a sign of wisdom and dedication to patient care. The teaching aspect of my career has become increasingly important to me as I've gained experience. There's something uniquely satisfying about watching young doctors develop their skills and confidence, knowing that you've played a role in shaping the next generation of healers, but teaching isn't just about passing on technical knowledge. It's about modeling the kind of professionalism, compassion, and dedication that medicine requires. Young doctors are always watching how we interact with patients, how we handle difficult situations, and how we balance the demands of career and personal life. I try to demonstrate that it's possible to be both excellent and kind, both demanding and supportive, both professionally accomplished and personally fulfilled. The harsh mentorship style that was common when I was training is giving way to more nurturing approaches that recognize the whole person, not just the developing physician. This shift in medical education reflects broader changes in how we understand human potential and motivation. Research in psychology and education has shown that people perform better when they feel supported and valued, when their efforts are recognized, and when their growth is celebrated. The old model of medical training, which relied heavily on intimidation and humiliation, produced competent doctors, but often at enormous personal cost. Many talented individuals left medicine because they couldn't tolerate the toxic culture, and those who stayed sometimes carried emotional scars that affected their relationships and well-being for years. We're creating a better model now, one that maintains high standards while also recognizing that doctors are human beings who need encouragement, support, and opportunities to grow. This approach doesn't lower expectations, it creates conditions where people can exceed expectations while maintaining their emotional and psychological health. My own experience with harsh criticism early in my career has made me particularly sensitive to the impact that words and actions can have on young people's development. I remember vividly how my father's dismissive comments made me question my abilities and worth. I'm determined never to be that kind of crushing force in someone else's life. Instead, I try to be the kind of mentor I wished I had during my most difficult moments, someone who sees potential even when it's not fully developed, who provides honest feedback without destroying confidence, who challenges people to grow while also celebrating their progress along the way. This approach has proven effective not just in training doctors, but in building the kind of collaborative culture that produces the best patient outcomes. When everyone on the team feels valued and supported, they're more likely to communicate openly, take appropriate risks, and work together effectively under pressure. The cardiac surgery unit at Metropolitan General has become known for both its excellent clinical outcomes and its positive work environment. We attract top residents and fellows not just because of our reputation for clinical excellence, but because people know they'll be treated with respect and given opportunities to learn and grow. This culture of mutual support extends beyond the medical staff to include everyone who contributes to patient care: nurses, technicians, administrators, and support staff. We've learned that excellent patient care requires excellent teamwork, and excellent teamwork requires treating everyone with dignity and respect. The transformation of our unit's culture didn't happen overnight. It required conscious effort to change ingrained patterns of behavior and communication. We had to learn new ways of giving feedback, new approaches to handling conflicts, and new methods of recognizing and celebrating success. Because it reminds us that we have the power to influence others' journeys just as others have influenced ours. This understanding has made me more intentional about how I use my position and influence. I actively seek opportunities to mentor young women in medicine, to speak at schools and conferences, and to advocate for policies that increase access to medical education and training. The field of medicine needs diverse voices and perspectives. And I'm committed to helping ensure that talented individuals from all backgrounds have the opportunity to pursue their dreams of becoming healers. Every barrier we remove, every stereotype we challenge, and every young person we encourage expands the pool of future doctors and ultimately benefits everyone who will need medical care.